Hi, my name is Jenny Devonshire, and welcome to the Pause2Perform podcast, where we talk about all things relating to wellness, what you should take a pause for in your day to optimise your mental and physical health and perform at your peak. So this week I am joined by Mike Jones, who is ex-British military and the founder of Better Happy. This is a business consultancy and management and leadership training provider. And their vision is that every employee is happy and every business is thriving. So welcome to the podcast, Mike.
Thank you for having me, Jenny.
I thought we could start off and maybe you could just give a bit of an introduction to yourself, your journey and what you do over at Better Happy.
Yeah, sure. So thank you for that kind introduction already. So yeah, my name's Mike. I started my professional career in the British Army. I was an Army intelligence analyst and did 5 years with them, did 2 tours of Afghanistan back to back, and then came out in my mid-20s and decided I wanted to do something different. And actually, when I was around that age, I didn't really know what I wanted to do in my life, but I knew that career hadn't made me happy. I'd had some difficulties with a manager towards the last year, so it had quite a negative impact on my mental health. But I'd also had the money and the kind of career and the freedom, so I wasn't really sure what was going to make me happy in life, because that didn't. So being very spiritual, very cliche, I decided to get on a one-way ticket to Thailand, to Southeast Asia, and just see if I could find any answers out there, and also just relax, because I've had a year in Afghanistan, 5 years in the army. So then I went over to Thailand, and I won't paint it in rose tinted glasses. The first thing I did was get drunk for a month. That was my form of decompression, and then I ended up traveling to Australia and different places. But I remember when I was living in Australia, I was walking in Perth, actually, where I know a friend of yours lives. I was walking to work one day through Perth city, and I was thinking to myself, I don't think I know what I need from life to make me happy. I know my life's good. I know I've got lots of privilege to be born and have the ability to travel and live in places like Australia and the UK. I still feel like something's missing. There's just something wrong with me. And I wasn't depressed. I just felt like maybe I was a bit unfulfilled. And whilst I was having that internal dialogue, I remember walking past a bookstore in Perth train station. It's probably not there anymore, but it had one of those glass windows, and they do displays of different books, and sometimes they promote one book, so you'll see the same book over and over and over again. And I was having this internal dialogue walking to work, and I saw this face looking at me smiling, and it was the Dalai Lama. I didn't know it at the time, and it was the Dalai Lama looking at me, because he's kept his face on the cover of this book about 50 times, and the book was called The Art of Happiness. And I thought to myself, well, considering the internal dialogue that I've got going on right now, that's probably a good book to buy. And I hadn't really, apart from a couple of army books, hadn't really read properly for years. So I bought the book and I started reading it, and it just spoke to me at a deep level. So I read that book in 2 days, and that completely changed my outlook on life and my philosophy that I was carrying around in my head. Kind of helped me think that the meaning of life is to be happy and to help others be happy, and that when you help others and you're a good person, that makes you happy. Other stuff in their emotional intelligence, letting go of when people have done wrong to you, because it's you that suffers. So loads of kind of deep level epiphanies. And I remember reading this book and thinking, why isn't this taught at school? And from that moment onwards, I completely changed the way I approached my life. I stopped drinking. I started volunteering. I still do to this day. It led to me starting my first business, which was a gym, out of the desire to help people, and ultimately to me founding Better Happy, which is what I do now. So I travelled for a couple more years. I lived on monasteries in Thailand and Nepal. I really went deep into the Buddhist literature and philosophy. I learned how to meditate, all of that stuff, and then came back to the UK, started my first business, driven by that desire to help people. Actually burnt out in my first business, so that's another learning curve, which perhaps we can discuss today. And then that led to me founding Better Happy and working with managers and leaders in businesses.
Amazing. So what is it that you do at Better Happy?
There's two major things that we do. I mean, to summarize it, we try and create happy places to work. So we go in, we work with the senior leadership team, and we make sure that the strategy that's in place in the business is aligned to creating an engaging environment that people want to work for and people enjoy working for. But just doing that on itself doesn't work. So we also work to train, develop, and help the managers and the leaders in the areas of health, engagement, and performance, so working without burning out. And when you combine those two and you make sure you've got the right environment in the business and the leaders and managers are able to work in a way that's good for them and good for others, you create a happy place to work. And when you've got a happy place to work, people want to work for you, people want to work hard for you, people don't want to leave, and you get better results in your business.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. So, and is there any particular sort of success stories you have from working with business that you're particularly proud of?
There's tons of success stories. I suppose there's two things that make me proud, and it's when the managers and leaders that we've worked with have been able to change their approach to work and life so that they're actually in a better place. We've got lots of examples of that. And then on a higher level as well, when the business is able to say, we've got this in place now and we've got this great culture that's a positive, and we work in a different way, and business doesn't feel like a stress. Because for most businesses and for most people in business, it feels like an uphill battle, because not through lack of motivation or lack of drive, but often the opposite actually, because they're so driven. But for most businesses, it's a struggle and people. And I love it when we come away and they're like, months down the line, they're like, actually, it's no longer feels like a struggle. It's still an effort, but it feels like this enjoyable journey. So things that stand out to mind, the work we've done with Travelodge really, really stands out to my mind, because that was a big nerve-wracking challenge because it's such a big organisation. And we've worked with over 100 of the managers in that organisation now, and I got a really good relationship with the head of talent, and I have regular conversations with him, and they're seeing the changes take place culturally now, because lots of people are getting aligned to the right way of approaching work. So that makes me feel great. And then also on an individual basis, when I get messages from people 6 months after we've worked with them, telling you that the updates on what they've done because they've changed the ways of working, or I could go on and on and on. We've got people somebody that springs to my mind, a lady called Lisa, who's works at an accountancy, always smiling, and we took her through the basics of health, not just her and her team, but how to look after your posture, for example, and the very basics of it. And it's about 4 months after she messaged and said, I've been doing it every morning, just in 10 minutes, and now my aches and pains have gone, and I feel more energetic, and just through these little implementations. So getting messages like that always makes me feel very happy and very proud.
That's amazing, yeah. And are there any sort of real common across the board reasons, or common reasons why people are unhappy at work?
That is a very good question, and a very important question. Yes, is the answer. There are some commonalities, and by and large, it's like 9% of employees in the UK are engaged, which is an awful statistic, which means that 91% of employees are going to work because they need to. And that's not positive, considering that we spend most of our waking adult lives working. Surely it makes sense that that's positive. Otherwise, we're just wasting our lives, aren't we? So we've got that statistic down there. And then we've got, last year, the data came out from Slack that 44 or 43% of managers were actively reporting burnout, which is a record-breaking high. So you've got managers that are burnt out, and you've got other sources of data coming from LinkedIn and big data collectors saying that around 75% of senior leaders, this is CEOs, business owners, are struggling with their well-being and considering leaving their company to go somewhere else where they've got more balance. So the reason I share those statistics with you is to highlight, well, we've got issues at every level. We've got people on the ground in delivery and they're just not engaged. We've got managers who normally are engaged, but they're burning themselves out, and leaders that are struggling with the stress of running a business. So at every stage, it's coming as a negative. And I think that the major factors to this is, number one, businesses are built on systems that were designed during the Industrial Revolution, which was by and large factory businesses. So when we have factory business, we've got people queuing up to work for us because there's poverty and mass unemployment. So people will come and work for you regardless of how good the quality of work you provide is. And the quality of work is repetitive, non-thinking manual labour. So all of our management systems are built around that. And many businesses today are still trying to use those systems. So it's like top-down goal setting, not involving employees in the bigger picture and how to grow the business. We have that piece, which means that we're creating not very engaging environments. We've got managers that don't get trained. It's like 80% plus of managers don't receive any training, and leaders. So you've got people going into roles where they've got to manage teams, they've got to manage workload, they've got to address poor behaviour. And they're not getting any training for that. So they suffer with their health. And this is a vicious circle, because it tends to be that of that pool of employees that you have, the most engaged ones get promoted to management. But then we put them into management, don't develop them, and then they suffer and get burnt out. So you've got leaders that are stressed, overwhelmed, and burnt out. So they're creating a culture of stress and burnout. So it's a lack of training. It's the wrong setup, and then you add to that, just to make it more complicated for people, that modern life is challenging to be healthy. Let's put it that way. You can be healthier now humans can be healthier today than they've ever been before. You can have the perfect diet. We've got more science and insights into how to do that. We can train in a variety of ways that are perfectly tailored to our bodies. We can find mental training from meditation masters and business mentors and spiritual leaders from around the world. So, we can actually be healthier than ever before. But if we just go with the flow, standard life isn't as healthy as it used to be. We've got sedentary work, we've got mobile phones to compare ourselves to people all the time. We're constantly connected to the digital age. Much of our evolutionary brain is actually wired to work against us in the modern environment. So we've kind of gone to extremes. We've got more opportunity now to be healthier and happier than we've ever been before, but we've also got more opportunity to be unhealthier and unhappier than ever before. So you've got that facet as well. So you've got people struggling with their health, you've got managers and leaders burnt out and stressed out, and then you've got a system that's not built to engage people, but just built to get people to do repetitive tasks. I think those are the three major factors for why it's an uphill battle for most people.
Yeah, you touched on burnout a few times there. So I thought maybe this is a good time to talk about your own experience of it, and if there's any tips of how to sort of overcome it, mitigate it, prevent it from happening in the first place.
Yeah, definitely. So I started my first business, and I think this is an important thing to caveat this with, after spending 2 years traveling, living on monasteries and studying mindfulness. So I probably started with more basic training around how to look after your mind than your average person, I would suggest. What I did was, over the next 4 or 5 years, was work myself into the ground, take 2 weeks holiday over 5 years, neglect my personal relationships, and in the end up completely burnt out and depressed. So the reason I share that is to highlight that it's not a logical thing. So like, everyone knows that burnout's bad, and everybody knows that working too much isn't good for your health. But we still do it because it's an emotional thing. So we need to understand that first. We need to understand that burnout's the outcome of working too much, but we do it, especially if we care about our careers or our businesses, which is why burnout's so high amongst business owners, leaders and managers, because by and large, that tends to be the most passionate people. So if you're passionate about your career or passionate about your job or your business, you're, I would say, at a high risk of burnout, not because you're stupid, but because you're emotionally wired and you're going to overwork. So number one is accepting that it's a bad thing, and that the chances are you will do it if you care about your work and your business. And that's probably one of the key messages that I take to managers and leaders and CEOs and heads of departments and business owners. It's like, look, you're probably going to do it. So accept that, because if you just rely on understanding it and you think that's going to stop it from happening, chances are you're going to be wrong. And I'm a really good living example of that. Then it's having a little bit of understanding as to why do you do it. And it's, humans aren't hardwired for balance. If you think for 95% of our time on this planet, we were hunter-gatherers, and work, social life, health, family, all of that was intertwined. We didn't have to think about balancing it. Whereas today, it's the first time ever humans have had to try and figure out how to fit work, personal life, health and fitness, all of that stuff in. It's the first time we've ever had to try and figure out how to balance all that in. So that's a new challenge. Yeah, so we've got that. And then, so it's a new challenge. We're not really hardwired to do it. The human has never really before had to think about doing that. So it doesn't come naturally. And then if you're passionate about what you're doing, you will do too much of it. Of course you will. So if you're passionate about your business, you're just going to want to work too much. And you tell yourself that you won't do it. But each week when things pop up, you will. Also, if you've got any lack of self-esteem, and the truth is, most people haven't got particularly high levels of self-esteem. If they did, we'd all be in super great shape and we'd all be super wealthy because we just spend all of our time prioritizing ourselves and working in a way that's sustainable. Most of us haven't got a very good level of self-esteem, and most of us don't encounter those self-esteem issues until we get into a leadership or management or business ownership position. And once you're in those positions, low levels of self-esteem will lead to you telling yourself you're not good at what you're doing, or you're not doing a good enough job. So you need to make up for that by working more and more and more and more and more. Really common in management, really common at CEO/MD level. But people tend to think that because people are managers or leaders or CEOs, they've got their shiz together as such. But the truth is that they normally haven't, because they're human beings. So lack of self-esteem will lead to you just taking on too much and constantly putting this pressure on yourself to work more and more and more as well. If you identify yourself as being a perfectionist, let's say, which I do sometimes, then that's a sign of low self-esteem. And the reason that you're a perfectionist isn't because what you probably tell yourself it is, and that's because you've got a love for the high standard. It's because you don't believe what you do is good enough, so you've constantly got to try and make everything perfect. And obviously, nothing's ever perfect. So when you've got that mindset with you, you'll just work until you physically can't work anymore. And I see this. I did it personally, and I see it with everybody at every level of business now, especially once you get into management and leadership roles. You see just people just working as much as is physically and mentally possible, and only stopping when they need to sleep, or their wives are about to leave them, or husbands are about to leave them. Only stopping when they have to. And you're like, well, why is that happening? Let's dig into the why. Because most people come in and say, you need better time management. And you're like, well, or the business needs to reduce workload. And that's a load of rubbish, I think. It's like, it doesn't matter if the business could reduce the workload. If you've got people that don't think they're doing a good enough job and working too much, it's never going to stop. Even if you make the work, even if you give somebody like 2 menial tasks, if they're a perfectionist, they'll spend the whole week torturing themselves over it. So we've got to learn to understand that and how to create a healthy relationship with that part of us.
Yeah, I've done quite a lot of research on imposter syndrome, because it's something that I've suffered from for many years, as soon as I got into my fitness career. And that's exactly it. It's like you worry that you're this imposter, and there's the imposter cycle. And then you can either go two ways. It's either the perfectionist, so they'll over prepare and put loads more work into it than needs to be done, or they'll procrastinate, and there's a form of self-handicapping. And then they'll work really hard. And then this belief that they need to constantly put more and more and more into it, because they fear that they are an imposter and they shouldn't be in the position. And it's very much managers, CEOs that suffer from it. So on the outside, you see these super successful people, but actually they're there thinking that they're going to get found out at any minute as this imposter. Which definitely really interesting subject I found.
Yeah. And the important thing is what you've just said there is, you had it, and people need to hear that. And then, because everybody has imposter syndrome, apart from unless you're a clinically diagnosed psychopath, the chances are you're going to have imposter syndrome. You're going to think you're not doing a good enough job, because you're a human being, and it's just part of it's part of the hardwiring of the human brain. We've evolved to constantly compare ourselves to other people because we're social creatures. And when we were hunter-gatherers, if we weren't regularly comparing ourselves to those people that we were around, chances are we'd start misbehaving, and then we get kicked out of the tribe. And then if we got kicked out of the tribe, that's death. You're going to die. If you haven't got other people around you, it's not like it is today where you can go on the internet and order some food. It's like you're not going to eat. You're not going to have protection from the elements unless you've got a tribe. So fitting in for 190,000 plus years was essential for human survival. Longer than that, if you go back to how we've evolved. So it's perfectly natural to have imposter syndrome. It just means you're a human being, and you'd be a bit weird if you didn't have it. And the important piece I think is not trying to battle with it and wish you didn't have it, and telling yourself that once you get to a certain level it will go, but just accepting that it's normal. Because once you've accepted that it's normal, you can create a healthy relationship with it, and you can get on with your life. But we don't seem to be talking about that. It blows my mind.
So I kept on doing more and more courses, thinking that when I do this course, then I'll feel good enough. Then I'll feel like an expert. And I just did so many. And obviously there is a positive to that, in that, I'm much more qualified than other people. But because it was never, obviously it wasn't the solution, because that wasn't the problem. It just meant that I still had all this self-doubt. But yeah, but also it has sort of spurred me on to always try and do better. But now, after studying it, and I actually did like an intervention study for my master's recently, and I did it around cognitive behaviour therapy. So sort of realising that it's an irrational belief rather than being true, because there's so much evidence to the contrary. But yeah, I think people are talking about it a lot more. I see it online a lot more, which is good, because I think that's the fear of people thinking they're the only one, and that they are like this imposter. But yeah, I think that's one of the good things about social media and things, is people are more open these days, and mental health. I think that, like, the stigma around it is so much less than it used to be, which is great. I just wanted to ask you, actually, because you do the health method. That's your kind of in your business. Do you think you could let us know a little bit more about what that is?
Yeah, of course. So I actually started Better Happy. My first business was a gym. It was a functional fitness gym, CrossFit gym, for those of you who know that kind of area. So it's about group training, bringing people together. So it's not like your standard kind of bodybuilding gym where you go in and everyone's got vests on and they're grunting. It's like you go in and there'll be women, children, busy working professionals come in together and train. And so that was my first business. And when I had that, I had an opportunity to start doing some wellbeing based workshops for businesses. Because one of the guys that trained with me used to be my business partner, actually. He had an events company, and so he was getting demand for events that aren't just team building but are actually more focused around health. And he was like, "Oh, Mike, do you think you could do this?" I was like, "Yeah, no problem." So Better Happy was founded as a wellbeing events style company, really. And then as COVID came along and I was hitting burnout, I decided to close the gym and have a good 4 or 5 month rest, but also was formulating in my mind, what do I want to do? Who am I? And that vision was to work with businesses, because I thought I could have a wider reach. My big pie in the sky thinking is that happy people contribute to society, unhappy people take from society. I'm a living example of that. Before I found my philosophies through Buddhism, I just used to drink a lot, get myself in trouble, and maybe not be the most contribute member to society. But once I got that philosophy and that way of living, I started volunteering and trying to make businesses and doing all these different things, and it's led on to me helping multiple businesses and lots of different people. So sorry, going on a slight tangent, but yeah, I got back in contact with that. What's my philosophy? I want to help people be healthy. I want to help people be happy. Where's the place that I can do that the most? In businesses. Are wellbeing workshops enough? No, I don't think they are, because you just go in, you give people some insights, inspiration, and knowledge about how to fix this component of your life, and then you leave. And then we were getting really good feedback from that, but there was an ask for more, and I could see in my mind that there was a space for more, and that by doing that, I could provide a better service, I could make more of an established business and have a bigger impact. So to simplify the HELPS method first, it's 2 components. It's health and engagement. So before I go into the detail, it's health and engagement. So the theory is, and our logo crosses like that. So that's why I'm doing that with my hands, which is weird. So nobody's listening, they're going to be like, "What are you talking about? I can't see anyone." So there's like 2 components. So it's like health and engagement. And the theory is I'm a living example of this. You can know everything in the world about how to be healthy. Okay, I used to own a gym, so I knew quite a lot, and I was in an environment that supported me to be healthy. But if you're working in a way that doesn't need to be engaged, and that might be number one, that you're just not engaged in the work because it's not linked to the bigger picture, or you don't get to contribute, or you don't feel listened to. If you're not engaged, all of the health stuff won't matter, because your work's going to be draining you. So the key really is, do I know how to be healthy, the basics of health, and do I have a job that engages me? Because if I've got a job that engages me, I feel energized by my work. And if I feel energized by my work, then I can implement the health stuff. So that was the kind of, that's what it's got to be. So it's really a combination of health and engagement, but there are some other pieces that need to be kind of bolted on to make that work. So that's where the HELPS method comes from. So it's and I can't never say this, an analogy. So it's health, is the H. E is engagement, L is leadership, P is performance, and it's actually performance without burnout, so training people to work in a way that they can get results without burning out. And then S is strategy, and the strategy is all around, does everyone in this business know what the vision is? Does everyone know what the mission is? Are we linking everybody's work to the big picture? Because people don't want a job, they want to make a difference. So you've got to have that in place as well. So that's the breakdown of the HELPS methodology.
And are like all the employees involved in this process, or is it like you work with the leaders and then they work with the employees to kind of help to implement it?
Yeah, it depends on the size of the organisation. Obviously, the vision is that all employees are involved or will be affected by it. So in a smaller organisation, we'll often go and do workshops with the teams, with the employees to kind of to influence everybody. With larger organisations, we tend to work mainly due to issues of scale and how things are realistically going to work. We tend to work mainly with the leadership and the management team, and then give them constant support and tools and resources to make sure that they're able to then go and pass this on to their teams. Because it really does boil down to the managers and the leaders. If the managers can do this, if the managers can work in a way that's sustainable, can look after their health alongside their jobs, they can create cultures of that with their teams. If the managers can't do it, it doesn't matter how much you do with the employees, it's never going to change, because they're being dropped back into an environment where that's not the way things are done. So if it's a big business, mainly with the management and leadership team. If it's a smaller business, we'll work with the employees as well. But the magic does tend to happen with the managers and the leaders.
Yeah, I've been doing some research on like what makes a good wellness intervention, and they all said it has to come like the leadership team has to lead by example. They have to be on board and they have to make the changes. Otherwise, again, you're just telling people what to do, and that kind of comes back to what I think you touched on earlier about like autonomy. It's like so important for one of our psychological needs is feeling like we have control and autonomy over the situation. So if the leadership's just telling you what to do and then they're not doing themselves and you're not involved, then it's not going to really set up for success.
Yeah, that's where that strategy piece comes in, isn't it? Because we think, I mean, you could go into a separate debate here about what's more important, health, like well-being as we would call it, or health, or engagement. And I would actually argue that if you get the engagement piece right, you're going to have more of a positive impact on well-being than you are if you go into an organisation that's got crappy engagement and do the most perfect health and well-being intervention. Because, like I said before, even if somebody knows nothing about health, if they're coming away from work feeling energised and like they're valued and like they're appreciated, they're probably going to they're more likely to look after their health. So I think that part's vital, probably as if not more important than the actual how do we be healthy stuff. It's almost like that. How do we be healthy is just a process that somebody needs to learn.
Yeah. I mean, I remember back in the day, I was working as a PA in an office and I absolutely hated it. Wasn't engaged at all. I'd either be really super busy or had nothing to do, and having nothing to do is like the worst thing ever. And that's exactly when I started sort of drinking every day. When you're unhappy, you do all these other destructive behaviours. And then as soon as I left and became a personal trainer, everyone said I was a different person. And then obviously, I wouldn't have wanted to drink in the week anyway, because it's you're on your feet all day, and as you know from working in a gym. But it was a knock-on effect. That unhappiness at the workplace was having such an effect on the rest of my life and my health, and I just needed to change that. So yeah, I can see why that is super important.
There's a quote from a guy called Alexander de Hedge, I think his name is. He's Dutch, and he's got a book with lots of quotes. He's very wise, and he says, if a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment, not the flower. And I think that's something that we all need to think about and understand. And often when people are upset or unhappy or feeling low in self-confidence, often it's the environment. If you're going into work every day and you're just not being made to feel like you've got any value or purpose, you're going to struggle to be a healthy person. Because 60% plus of your day is you feeling like you're worthless. So if you're struggling with your health and your well-being, and you're not happy at work, and it's that not being happy at work piece is probably the most important piece. And if businesses want to help their employees be healthier and enjoy more well-being and spend less time sick. And then there's another interesting fact, isn't it, that a lot of people that are off sick aren't genuinely sick, they just don't like their job, so they're going to play the system. So it's like, actually, if you really want to reduce absenteeism and presenteeism, like, as much positive impact, if not more, is going to come from creating an engaging workplace as would come from
Absolutely.
yoga lessons or gym memberships or walking challenges, whatever it will be.
And what can employees do to take control of their own happiness and well-being at work?
As in leaders, business owners, CEOs, etc.
And also everyone who's in the workplace, or is it very much it has to come from the leaders and the managers?
Okay. Well, no. So if the question is what can employers do to improve happiness in their own businesses, it's think about that method that I just shared with you. So I would start with engagement. And I would look at how engaged is our workforce. And you can pay money to go and get that done. There's tons and tons of engagement survey software platforms, or just ask everybody in your company with a piece of paper and with a pen to score a 1 to 10 on the 4 key drivers of engagement, which is, do we have a strategic narrative? So is there a vision and a mission that you can connect your work to? Score us 1 to 10 on that. Are our managers engaging? Okay, so do you feel that your manager cares about you and engages you? 10, yeah, amazing. 1, awful. Do employees have a voice? Do you feel like you can share your ideas and influence the direction of the company? And do you feel like we've got integrity? So is there a set of values that people live by and that are actually how true? And that'll give you a pretty accurate score of how engaged your company is. And get everybody in the business to score 1 to 10 on each one of those, get it all in, divide the totals up by how many people you've got, and look at what's going on. Look at, which bit, are any of the scores high or any of the scores low? What do you need to do to fix that? That's the starting point. I'd start with that. I wouldn't even get lost in the best wellbeing intervention, apps, software, even external trainers to an extent, until you've done that. If you bring Mike in and Better Happy, it's one of the first things we're going to do. We're going to try and understand what's going on with engagement in your company. So if you don't want to do it yourself, then you can bring somebody in. But any company can do that tomorrow. Why don't companies do it? Because they're scared of what they're going to find out. They're scared people might be disengaged. They're scared that some people don't like their manager and that's going to come out and then it's going to cause difficulty. Tough, if you want your business to be a happy place to work, that's got high levels of engagement, that attracts the right people, that's got people that work hard, you've got to have difficult conversations, and you've got to get insights into what's going right and what's going wrong. Most of the issues we face come from a fear of trying to address bad situations or understanding them. It's just human nature, isn't it? We don't want to know that something might not be good, so we don't ask. That's what's holding you back. That's why systems are important, because systems can overcome human emotion, and human emotion will always get in the way of us achieving what we want to achieve. Even happiness takes effort. We're called Better Happy, and I think people think happy means to feel joyful and to want to jump around and smile all the time. I mean, that's not my understanding of happiness. But the truth is, if you want to be happy, it's going to take effort. If you want to achieve goals in your business, it's going to take effort. If you want good levels of well-being in your business, that's going to take effort. If you want good levels of well-being in your own life, it's going to take effort. And that's what it all comes down to. Have we got the systems and structure in place to constantly encourage people to take effort to do what's right? And if we haven't, we're laying ourselves out to the whims of human emotion, and that's going to hold us back in our own lives as well.
Yeah. Yes, but I was doing some research on sort of happiness and things like that, and they did a study. Well, they found there's happiness is determined by 3 factors. 50% was genetic, which I found quite interesting. 10% was your life circumstances, and 40% was determined by intentional activities and practices, which I think is great, because it goes to show that you can take control of it rather than it just all being just outside of yourself. It can be something that can be modified.
Looking at those statistics, even if you are in the worst camp of luck, where you're born with that 50%, not supporting your health, it still shows you that's only 50%. So it's still within your control. It might not be as easy, but it's still within your control. So it's a good piece of data to know, I think.
Exactly. I'll send you the link to it. And how can companies measure the impact of their efforts to improve workplace happiness? Are there any particular metrics that are like sort of the most important?
So this is where you come down to trying to link what you think is the right thing to do with what is the right thing to do for the company. So we've got employee engagement, we've got employee happiness, you've got companies like Friday Pulse, which are fantastic for doing that. Countless companies that are doing employee engagement, countless companies that are measuring well-being. So there's different ways you can measure that, and it's not overly complicated. It's obviously a collection of questions that give us an overall score. Now, the important piece, which you just touched on, is why would we do that? And not just because it's the right thing to do, because doing something just because it's the right thing to do doesn't pay the bills. So it's understanding the link between that stuff and the stuff that matters in regards to the language of business. So this is where if you haven't already got this stuff in place, you need to put it in place, but you need to track employee retention levels, employee productivity levels, which is really kind of linked in with engagement. So that does engagement's a good measure because it kind of tells us how productive are people. But then you need to have your KPIs in your business as well, which are actually saying, is that productivity actually producing results? And then other things as well that you might not see as being so obvious, such as customer satisfaction levels. Can we correlate that when the staff are happier, the customers are happier? Because if we can, then it makes it easy for us to spend time on that. Questions that aren't so obvious. So how many of your people are intending to be here in the next 12 months? Because that's not turnover right now, but you tend to see that when you improve health and happiness in the business, you'll tend to see that less people are intending to leave in the next 12 months. So you've got that better longevity of staff. Obviously, that links to retention over time. And then ultimately, you've got other things, well, haven't you? Like you're absent. So how many people are absent at work? How many people are struggling with stress? So that's a good question because that gives you an idea into performance as well. And then ultimately profitability. So there's no right or wrong in how you measure it, but I think the key thing is to reverse engineer it from the key things that you're measuring in your business, which are always going to be revolving around sales, employee turnover, customer satisfaction, productivity, however you measure that, KPIs, whatever it might be, and then link the things in. But you've got to figure out ways. Other companies measure their insurance bills because if they've got more people that claim their insurance bills going up. Whereas if they put interventions in place, they tend to see that the insurance cost goes down because there's less people claiming on insurance. So employee assistance programs, it's complex. You've got to work. I think you've got to work with your HR department on that to link the costs, but they're there. There's also great books such as Monetizing the Employee Experience, written by Mike Sharples over at Brand Experiences, which are for people in HR departments to get a really clear picture on how can we directly link improving the experience our employees get to cost and profit. So because the businesses of the past didn't need to do this. This is the problem. So all the systems are built around not doing this, whereas today we do. So it's still something that businesses are trying to figure out.
That's some really useful things to kind of explore. So I've got now a bit of a personal question instead now. I was wondering, what makes you happy?
So what makes me happy is meaningful work and meaningful relationships. So we've got a tool to measure motivation. So I know that I'm really high on what's called the search of motivation. And that means that I get a thrill from knowing that I'm making a positive difference. So for me, I get way more excited about getting a Google review or somebody emailing me with a review or somebody phoning me saying, you shared this thing with me and it's had this positive impact on me. That makes me more genuinely happy than when an invoice lands in the bank account or whatever it might be. So it's that, and just meaningful relationships. So just spending time with my partner, walking my dogs, reminding myself to switch off, being in the sun. I love being love feeling the warmth of the sun.
Oh yeah, so like today is like a beautiful day. I don't know what it's like where you are, but I went to the gym, and it's just like when I just get the sun, I'm just like, oh, it makes me so happy. So, but yeah, and also going on holiday when it's like, when you get off the plane and like the warmth hits you, and you're just like, yes, this is it. Especially when you've come out of the winter.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was just reading something again. It was about gratitude because I've been writing like a gratitude journal for about 5 years now. Like before I go to bed every night, and then I was actually like looking up some research on it, and they found that they got them to either fill out their gratitude journal once a week or 3 times a week, and the people who filled it out once a week actually reported higher levels of well-being than the 3 times, which I thought was really interesting. And I think it was because they were sort of thinking that maybe it was more like a chore if you're doing it kind of more regularly. But I was like, I like writing mine every day, so I'm going to carry on. I'm quite happy, so it's all good.
Yeah, that is interesting. I suppose that might be linked into, and these are just theories, obviously, but I think 100% it works to use gratitude because the human brain's inherently negative, and it's from our evolution to spot the negative things and be aware of them. So rewiring it to hone in on the positive is really good for your mental health. However, I'd also argue that when we think too much about our own lives and our own things, that can create stress. And when we help others and think about other things, that can make us feel good. So perhaps that's why sometimes those that were doing it every day, maybe they were just, because it took so much effort to do it, because it's so unnatural, perhaps they just spending too much time in their own worlds. But once a week is enough to just come back. Once a week works for me. Daily doesn't work for me.
But also there's another study I looked up. It was about acts of kindness, because you sort of mentioned it earlier, and they found they got people to perform acts of kindness, and people who did, and they either had to do like 5 acts of kindness. It was either over a week or in a day, and those that did it in a day actually reported higher levels of well-being than the ones that did it over a week. So another thing that people can try and put into their daily routines: be really nice, be kind all day.
I think that back to the theory that I was just saying, which is, that's on a daily basis, just forcing you to do stuff for other people, not for yourself, can make you feel happy. And yeah, definitely. And I think we are hardwired to want to do that, which is why people actually want to go to work, believe it or not. People want to have meaningful work. The problem is that most businesses are set up in a way that makes it not meaningful. People get isolated. They don't get to have that positive interaction. Whereas many jobs, like where you go and see people that are interacting with us on a daily basis, you go to a supermarket. I know not all supermarket staff are happy, but you see people on the checkouts. You can see those people that just love the interaction and the chatting and the making people smile. And it's definitely something that we need. And I think that's one of the problems with modern businesses as well, is we're so digitized now. We spend so much time on our computers that the most powerful thing you've got in a business, which is people being together to work towards something meaningful and create meaningful relationships, it's like we've removed that relationship piece because we're so focused on the digital world and getting stuff done, and that very quickly drains people. I made that mistake even with Better Happy, even after I've learned the hard way. One of the things I loved about the gym was seeing and interacting with people on a daily basis, and that's probably why I could work in the way that I was working, which was unsustainable for 4 years, because I had, even though I was doing that really silly thing, working myself into the ground, I had tons of this human and social interaction, which maybe offsetted it a bit, not enough to stop it, but enough to keep me going for 4 or 5 years. Whereas we're Better Happy, because we're more of a consultancy business, and I spend less time with others, a lot of the times in the office, doing computer-based stuff. When I felt stressed or started to feel a bit overwhelmed, I've noticed it rises really quickly because I haven't got the human interaction piece.
Yeah, I guess that's like sort of what the drawbacks to working from home, and also like sort of automating all the supermarkets and things, because I've sort of heard that for some people that's the only interaction they're sort of getting, and to take that away, that sort of human connection, it's so important to us. And I wonder, so have you found from working with companies, are they trying to encourage people back into the workplace for those reasons of connectedness rather than anything else?
I'm just working back through different businesses in my head, and quite a few of them are like accountants and things like that, so they kind of like carried on, but they were coming back into the office relatively early on, and lots of hospitality, so they did stop for a bit, but then they're straight back in. You're not doing virtual working in hospitality. And yes, all of the businesses I work with, none of them have remained virtual. And I don't know if that, I don't know the reason why, to be honest. I haven't asked the question, but I think you'll find, I mean, I've studied the data, and the data I've read is that the happiest people at work are doing flexible. So they're doing a couple of days, 2 to 3 days on site, 2 to 3 days at home. And that those that go fully remote end up getting lonely and unhappy. Those that work all the time get stressed and overwhelmed. And that kind of hybrid piece is the magical piece in the middle, I think. I think the internet sways our thinking on this stuff as well. Because from most people I know, and this isn't I can't cite this to data, but from most people I know and most people I've worked with across many different businesses and personal friends, they want to go to work. They don't want to sit at home all day every day. They like the thought of flexible working time, because I do think 9 to 5 Monday to Friday is pointless for a lot of people. I think we've just been stuck in doing that rigidly, even to when it comes as a disservice. So I think that's a good thing that we're more open to hybrid and flexible working. But by and large, people want to go to work. It's what life's about, isn't it? Nobody wants to just sit at home all day every day and sit on a computer, even if they're building something amazing. Like I build stuff digitally to help people, but I want to go and deliver that. I want to go and see it work. I want to have meaningful connection to people. So I don't know if everyone's the same, but most people I know want to go to work.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I remember when the pandemic hit and I couldn't go and see clients. And I remember when I first was allowed to again, I was just so happy to see them, and it made me really appreciate it, because obviously you don't appreciate things until they're taken away from you necessarily. And I was like, oh yeah. This on Zoom is just not the same, and it's not for it's just for that sort of being with someone.
It's interesting that one of the most extreme forms of punishment is what we can often do to ourselves in our businesses and our roles by going to a fully remote working practice where, we remove ourselves from people. Well, obviously that's going to lead to people being unhappy, because people are social creatures.
Yeah, absolutely. And also I find if I'm when I'm not feeling great mentally, I will go into myself and pull away. Whereas I know as soon as I'm with other people, it makes me feel better. And it's funny how the one thing that you need, you kind of shy away from, but then as soon as you do it, you're like, oh, I feel so much better now. So it just again highlights that kind of fact.
What's fascinating there is when you're starting to feel like that, is it because you've been on your own for too long? Yeah. I was listening to exactly. So it's a vicious cycle, isn't it? I was listening to Jordan Peterson and Alex Huberman, so psychologist and neuroscientist, the other day, and they were saying how you can only get a lab rat addicted to cocaine if it's on its own. If it's with other lab rats, it's impossible to get it addicted to cocaine. And that's at a very basic kind of animal level. When we're socially connected, we're happy. When we're isolated, we become unhappy. We look for external things to keep us happy. You mentioned drinking, and whatever it might be. I've done a lot of work with addicts and with a business do some work with in Birmingham, and it's always loneliness 9 times out of 10.
Mm. Oh yeah. Yeah, globally, I think there's a lot of statistics around how sort of detrimental it is, especially for older people as well. I think so, people will die sooner, won't they, if they're on their own, and it's just a terrible thing to people to endure. And unfortunately, a lot of people are stuck in that kind of situation, which is really sad. But, yes, but I will.
I think businesses need to look at them, see that they are the antidote to that solution. They are, people used to get that human connection through their communities, through their religions, through their tribes. Most of us don't have those anymore. So it's well, where do we find this meaningful connection? Most people, it's through their work. So work needs to see themselves, businesses need to see themselves as the antidote to the modern health and happiness problems, not the problem. They are the solution.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just have one more question to ask you. It's been great chatting to you today. It's been really interesting. But it's one I asked everyone. What's one thing you recommend people take a pause for to improve their mental and physical health and optimize their performance?
Taking a pause to create a healthy relationship with your negative inner chatter. We've all got it. It's never going away. So instead of battling with it, just learn to recognize it and see it for what it is. And once you do that, you can start letting your own inner critic dictating how you do the things you do in your life, and start doing the things you genuinely want to do.
That's an excellent thing to take a pause for. Just to finish up, is there, if people want to work with you or get some more information, where can they find you?
Yeah, sure. Just connect me on LinkedIn or head over to betterhappy.co.uk and you can connect with the team through there, or you can book into a free workshop, which we host once a month. I don't know when our next one is, but it'll be on there. It's on at the top of the browser at the top. We can just scroll down to the bottom and it says book on a free workshop, book a call with me or somebody on the team, drop us an email.
Great, and I will link to those in the show notes so people can find them nice and easily. But thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for having me, Jenny. You too.
You've been listening to the Pause2Perform podcast with me, Jenny Devonshire. If you enjoyed this show, I'd really appreciate it if you could rate, review and subscribe. This helps other people find it, and hopefully I can help more people to improve their mental and physical health and optimise their performance.